I would say if you just take the strict point of view of an interpreter, so really playing a score, what's the improvised part in that? I mean, maybe yes. I mean, and I would say somehow yes, because you're still deciding millisecond after millisecond are your good.
Yeah, it's on the granular level.
But still, I mean, it also depends. You know, some musicians, they want to play and replay the exact same thing. In this case, they are going away from an improvisational thing. Others, basically, they know the piece and they are going to adjust totally to the space, to the moment, to everything, and they are in a real state of improvisation, even though they are not inventing a single note.
But you're somebody who plays really composed stuff, and don't you find like, okay, so there's probably one level where you're just, it's all you can do to just play the piece. But I think usually you probably go beyond that and you put something into it.
Right, no, of course. But it's interesting to see that you have some composers who push you to absolutely not improvise or put anything from you. You know, if you take Stockhausen, for example, Stockhausen doesn't want any input from an interpreter. That's not the problem. I mean, he's writing the things extremely accurately. All the parameters are perfectly defined in order that somehow the composition and the composer remain at the first plan, and the interpreter is even not an interpreter. It just is actually the musician is some sort of a translator from the score to the ear.
I always thought there was something aleatory in his music.
Well, sometimes, not all the pieces.
Some of the things where the people that are playing it choose a lot of stuff, or some.
No, some pieces.
Oh, but some pieces is like, yeah, but don't you think by specifying it more exactly, he's just kind of pushing that limit in a way or something?
Yeah, but for sure he doesn't need the input of the musician. This is clear. But it doesn't mean that the relation is wrong, but it's just another relation, I think. Or
I think about
take Brian Fernie Howe, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the music is so hard to play that basically even when you worked crazy hours and hundreds of hours and everything, basically if you get 70% of the score when you play on stage, you're the winner. So basically, you're absolutely not trying to do what you want to do. You're still just having this sort of infinite quest of playing what's on the page.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because.
But do you think is it actually possible? I mean, it's possible to play what's on the page insofar as it's indeterminate to some degree. Because you're talking about these people who get really specific, then it becomes more and more impossible to play.
Right. But it's interesting because I really think that the deepness of Fernie Howe music is precisely there. Is that by the impossibility of playing the thing, basically he's creating an indeterminacy, because maybe for one musician, the impossibility will be maybe just in this passage or in this thing, just in their very skill set. Or on the contrary, it's going to be, for another musician, it's another passage, it's another thing. So basically the piece will be always a little different, but it goes beyond the control of the musician.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the interest.
Do you think somebody like that, do you think they never feel like their piece has ever really been performed yet? Do they feel like they're just getting closer and closer to a performance, or do they feel like the flawed performance is a performance nonetheless?
That's a good question. Honestly, I don't know.
I
don't know, and I haven't read things. I mean, I'm sure they are, but I haven't found. And it's actually a really good question. But well, it brings to another question, which is what are the expectations of the composers? And it goes from here to there, because some composers, they really want, again, Stockhausen, he wants his music to be played this way, and this is clear, and so he does. There is a full apparatus to bring you in this direction. Other musicians, they do. Other composers, they do the opposite. Christian Wolff, for example. So he does everything that basically you don't understand what he wants you to do, and he won't give you any clue or whatever, even if you work with him. You know, you play the thing and say, so what do you think? And say, I'm not thinking, I'm just listening. And this is absolutely not the point. And so this is also interesting, and you know, and it's going to be the case. I mean, the few things we're going to do with Zelenka, precisely. I mean, he doesn't want anything but being surprised himself by the output of the way. But then it's always this relation between the composer and the musician, and the expectation of one another, basically, I think. But then, of course, what is the part of improvisation in that? You know, and take a musician in an orchestra, for example. Basically, they would never say that don't even talk about improvisation, because it's absolutely clear it's not the case. Now, philosophically, they have a super small, tiny part of choice or whatever, maybe that they could play a little bit like this or like that, but the frame is extremely restrained.
Mm-hmm.
Still, you take 10 clarinet players in the middle of the same orchestra playing the same piece, you will have 10 different results. So which means that, and it's not only because they are different physically and they play different instruments, but they will make tons and tons of choices. And once you start to make choices, basically you're almost in a state of improvisation somehow.
Well, it made me think of this thing. You know Ben Singer, right?
Yeah.
He was doing a app for this bass player from a symphony.
Right. Yeah.
To help the flutes and piccolos know how to bend their note, basically.
Exactly.
Like what semitone to hit the right overtone of the bass and
Exactly.
stuff like that. And that's interesting because that's one of those indeterminate zones, but they're talking about the musician composing in that zone.
Right.
You know? Which is like another, adding some sort of collective composition into it.
Right.
Which is totally different than improvisation.
I don't know, and then I'm not that sure, maybe, and that's the interest to me of the thing, is that basically, is it really different by the end? I mean, you know, even if you play back now, you're still in the same relation. You're absolutely not. You're playing. I mean, Bach would be totally amazed, or maybe not. I don't know, but totally, for sure, surprised by how we play his music now. And I'm sure even by Baroque specialists or whatever, he never heard his music played the way it's played now. Which is great, I think. And probably he would be really happy to hear that it could be different and all that. And so, but obviously the communication...
But what kind of difference is this?
Everything.
Like the tempos? The
tempos...
Well, obviously the
timbres.
temperament's different.
Yeah, that maybe
not a lot, but a
no,
little.
not a lot, because I mean a lot of musicians, they play the same temperament. But I'm sure that the notion itself of what is a tempo, what is, you know, what's your maybe again your freedom, because I mean because there is something there also, right, in the improvisation, right? I mean, free improv. I mean, it's the term is there now. Is it freedom? I'm not sure. And
yes,
and I don't feel freer when I improvise than when I'm playing a written piece, for example. I mean, I don't really feel myself more free. It's just another.
Well, it's interesting also because Europeans have a totally different relationship to the concept of freedom.
Well, that's for sure.
You know, it's like, for them it's an ambiguous concept. And for Americans, it's like, Yeah, they're terrified of the real thing, but they pretend they want it.
Right. No, it's true. I mean, to me, the term, I mean, the use of this word is totally absurdist. I mean, in this country, to me, because it's never actually. It's just more basically thinking that you make your own choices makes you free. That's the definition, I think.
Oh, like that thinking that you make your own choices makes you free. The delusion of freedom, in a way. Or were you just saying...
Right, no, but it's a total delusion to me. But everyone falls straight in the trap, I think.
Well, I think New York runs on that trap. You know what I mean? It's everybody's going to... the youth throw themselves upon it in waves in this idea of freedom, and they're all doing the same thing, and then the system exploits them, and another wave comes in.
Right. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, this notion of freedom is, I mean, well, it's an infinite philosophical thing.
Yeah, it's an old question.
Yeah, because I mean, the free jazz at the same time is now totally recognizable, idiomatic.
I feel like they got over that hump, sort of. I feel like the people were really complaining about that in the '90s, and I feel like by the teens they sort of worked their way through it, and now I hear all kinds of you don't even like you say that there's no distinction anymore between composition and improvisation for one thing. And there's a lot more classical people doing improvisation.
Oh, no, sorry, I wasn't clear. My point, I totally agree with that. No, my point was more that what we define now as free jazz is actually a very boxed and idiomatic thing.
Yeah.
And but of course, back in time, it wasn't. That's absolutely.
And I think there was there. I think the people who do it have recognized that, and it's put them through a lot of changes.
Oh, that's clear.
Yeah.
No, of course. No, I obviously, but even, yeah, but I mean, it's funny because I mean, I think even now we make fun of ourselves somehow. Playing free improv, whatever it means, and and you have a recording session, you do things and stuff, and you're like, well, actually, okay, the form was almost always the same, and you recognize the things, and actually, yes, I mean, the codes are maybe not the same as usual or something, but at the same time, you recreate other codes, other idioms.
He said, Bill Dixon, he used to teach at Bennington. Mm-hmm. I saw him do a performance in like the early 90s, and he said that anytime something becomes something that you do, it's no longer the music.
Right.
And of course he was like, he had just, at that point I had just seen him do a concert with Bill Cole with they basically sound like whale calls.
Okay, cool. Yeah. But what's hard, and I think specifically now it's a super hard time because everything turned into this sort of permanent self-justification for absolutely everything you're doing. Because you can't do anything without going through grants, through things, and basically you have to explain the whole thing before you even started to think about it, and it's a weird thing, I think. Everyone is always thinking about the format. I mean, whatever show you're putting on or something, you're immediately thinking, okay, am I using a video to then make a teaser? Am I doing this, that? So you're formatting the whole thing before it's actually done, and that's weird actually. I think. I mean, it's very how is castrateur? Castrer is when you when you cut the balls, right?
Yeah.
So which in French it's more
it's more general, kind of.
I mean, it is literal, but it's also very figurative. To say that suddenly, I mean, it blocks everything. I mean, you can't do the things anymore, basically.
Well, it seems to me like that when improvised music really thrives, it's in an urban environment where people can like casually, without too much preparation, like get together and do the music. You know what I mean? Or like there's a steady stream of gigs in that environment where people can like, because their idea is that composition is who you choose to improvise with.
Right, and this is a big thing that I totally defend as well. That's absolutely clear. But also, I see your point, but I would also say that the could I say that the spontaneous effect is not necessarily always a good thing either. I mean, my point is, if you know that you're going to play an improv concert or you're going to meet someone you've never played with in 2 months, these 2 months, they are the composition as well.
Yeah, I hear
you. Know what I mean? I mean, you're really projecting things, you're really preparing yourself, and that can also give extremely good results, you know what I mean? And not only, oh, let's just do something now because we are here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it could be great that way, but I also think that the prep time and just projecting yourself.
Yeah, even if you don't rehearse.
Oh, and particularly if you don't.
Yeah, it's
you
like
know, because you basically you build. It's like if you develop some sort of extra radars.
But yeah, but
everywhere,
it's not like it can't be like a script. It's more like a rule book, right?
Oh yeah, no, it's just a toolbox.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is
just
interesting.
Developing a mental toolbox. So I don't know. Sometimes also you're really developing an instrumental toolbox, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know that you're going to play with this person, or maybe just in some context.
Yeah, and you have a sense of like if they're loud, if they're quiet, if they play fast, if they play legato. You know.
Exactly.
You have these some idea of what they're going to bring to the table.
Right. And even if most of the time, and it's really funny because almost each time I've had this discussion with improvisers, it's this thing that you build a lot of things and obviously you project things, but after the first second you just sweep everything away. But still, I mean, what was there really brought all the energy and all the thing, and once you're there, basically you know that you can get rid of all this and you're really actually free to do things. And in this case, I think sometimes more than just a spontaneous thing, where, I mean, then the spontaneity sometimes work or not because, you know.
Yeah, it's funny, like
energies are good or not.
I was thinking about when I started doing improvisation, I was always bringing in this compositional baggage in with it, like that I had an idea of what I wanted to have happen, and then like in a way like you just adapt to the environment and what is going to happen, and then you turn that into your intention, which is like it's inevitable, but is it disastrous? Maybe it's not. Maybe it's an accommodation with reality. I have different thoughts about that.
Right.
Because like the idea of composition is you have an idea of a sound that you want to exist, and you know whatever lengths it takes to make that sound exist, but then you've got like what instruments do you have available? You have the tradition of the orchestra, or you have the different inventions, electronic and whatnot, but you always have to work with something that was already prepared.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But the improvisers like Bill Dixon, I guess he was really trying to get away from that and doing things like on a trumpet that were these incredibly low, long notes. Like the note would last like 30 seconds or something like that, and it would be like in the tubas range or something.
Okay, yeah, right.
But like how far can you go with that, and is it just about negating?
Yeah, but what is interesting is, somehow just your description of this very thing is almost, sorry, I'm just playing evil advocate for the sake of the debate or the discussion, but basically if he's recognizable by these sounds and stuff, basically this is not improvisation. This is just, it's something which has been practiced, then it's turned into some sort of a signature or thing, which is great, but how far? I mean, this is a composition. I mean, at this moment, this is clear.
Yeah.
But it's also this thing where when you improvise, I mean, that's always this double thing. That on the one hand, I mean, you learn to improvise. You develop an experience of improvisation. So my point is, I don't believe in an interesting or whatever improv by anyone, non-musician or I don't know what. I mean, yeah, it could be a great moment, it could be a great thing, but I think again, the experience and it's like life. I mean, you don't do the same thing when you're 50 or when you're 20. I mean, it's just because you have more background, you have thought about things and all that, and you can do super horrible thing at 50. It's not the question, not to say it's better, but you just have another toolbox basically that you're using.
Well, and I was also thinking about it also just from kind of like a biological standpoint. Like getting together in groups and making sounds is like this human thing that we do. And in a way, like the fact, the different kinds of ways of composing music that have evolved out of that might just be secondary to the, to that thing that we do as humans.
Well, right, but I totally agree. But then, I guess it's the other big constant reflection on some sort of intuition and thinking basically and developing, because I agree. I mean, and it was interesting. Was it when we were out just upstairs, right, for the performance.
Jordan Watson's.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sorry.
I did. Yeah, I had it.
That's really interesting. That basically it's almost impossible to, take any group and you have one percussion instrument or something or whatever can give a beat, and it's going to be always just a beat played like this, always between 120 BPM, and basically it's even not a 4/4, in the music.
Yeah, it's like a 1/1.
It's a 1/1, yeah, or 1/4, but it's true, it's a 1/1 thing. But then the question is, so is it because it's natural, or is it because of a lack of possibilities to do something else? And I think it's that. Because most of the time, because very interestingly, if you take, for example, kind of advanced classical musicians, and you have a workshop for improv with them, it's always gonna go toward that. Maybe because they are developed, it's gonna be a 2/4 instead of a 1/4, honestly. But always, if there is a notion of rhythm in an improvisation, they have no idea how to get out of just a pulse, and which will always be, again, between 100 and 120 BPM, you know what I mean? This sort of, like walking, kind of fast walk. And it will never be, let's say, a slow pulse. Never. That it doesn't exist, because even doing that, it's already almost a decision to do it, and you have to know how, basically to be immediately put in that. So then really I don't know, of course it's natural, but I don't know, because somehow I would say that the most natural way of doing music is cheering for a team, for a soccer team or for a hockey team. You know what I mean? When you have 200 people singing, or thousands of people singing in a stadium, somehow, well, yeah, I mean...
Well, stadiums, to me, strike me as being really weird environments for people, and I think they're kind of dangerous environments, you know? But another thing that I wanted to bring up earlier that I forgot, and then it brought it back, was like the idea that like a lot of the kind of free improv that people do is really, it's more like sport than composition. Like you pretty much know who the goalie is and who the running back is. I'd say like the drummer is the goalie, and you know what I mean? And it's like that they pretty much always do the same thing, right? But it's kind of, the fun is in the way the game goes down, and
right.
And there's not two sides, there's only one side. But that, like, in that way, it's so totally different than composed music, which is really like somebody has visited the realm of the form of ideas and has brought this form out that's like as close to perfect as they can put it down, and you know what I mean?
Yes, I'm not sure I follow you to the end of that.